stage. Let's give it up.
Well, that was my talk. You know everything I know. Thank you. I just want to absorb this for a moment from up here to see this many people that are willing to come out and talk about the subject of gender. What we would give to have everyone this interested in this incredibly important topic. I wish I had time to sit down with everybody in this room and hear about the stories about why you're here tonight. Because the collection of those stories would probably write a book that I in particular would be very interested in reading. Thank you all for coming. Jenna Lopez and I both thank you for coming. We thank Amber and Amanda for including this in Science on Tap. We thank the folks from Southwestern Washington PFLAG for running the table for us. Jessica and Eunice, thank you so much. And thanks, Jessica. Yes, please do. And thank Jessica for bringing our presentation to the attention of Science on Tap. I am a member of the board at Skagit PFLAG. I come from the North Country, way up there. And we started a speakers bureau about 3 years ago. And I have found that one of the most thrilling things I've done in my career has been to do these talks to groups like you. And I find that the subject matter that I'm going to cover with you, you may think you don't want to know. You're looking at a lot of scientific terms up here. And if I were you, I'd be saying, oh good grief, this is Wednesday night. This was not what I had in mind, all right? But I promise you that by the time you leave here tonight, you will know a lot of things you didn't know before. I also promise you that you're going to have hundreds of questions. And I'm glad about that, because I hope you ask them. Everywhere, anywhere. I hope you research this topic. Because in our culture, in the world at large, we don't understand the term gender. We have confused it, we have abused it, we have misused it, and as a result, a lot of people in our world suffer. So, yes, go ahead, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that is the reason that we both do this presentation. And in particular, I care a great deal about kids. And kids who know by the age of 3 and 4 what their gender is. And it may not match their sexual anatomy. And it's for those kids in particular that I do this talk, because I want people to understand that they know what they're talking about. Because this gender thing is real. I want to start out. This is just a little introductory thing, and I just basically said it all, so I'm going to move through this. I want to introduce you to someone. This is Linda, and this is her at age 5. Look at this face. This is not a happy face. And Linda has been chosen to be the flower girl at her uncle's wedding. And this outfit is sheer torture for her. All right? She would much, much rather be here. Because this is Roy Rogers, age 5. Now, we're going to date ourselves. How many of you know who Roy Rogers is? I know, I sussed you out initially. I knew there would be people here who could relate. And who was Roy Rogers' wife? I know. And you know, they had Dale Evans outfits. I could have had one of those. It was the last thing on earth I wanted, because I wanted to be Roy Rogers. And for those of you who just want to walk down memory lane for a moment, warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it? All right, enough of that. Okay, we're going to start this presentation with a party. You are invited to a party. And I will want to know how many of you have been to one of these parties. You know what it is. It's what people call the gender reveal party. That's not what it is. It is the sexual anatomy reveal party. Now, when people cut into this cake, you have white, or you have pink or blue cake, right? That tells you what the gender is of this child. To be accurate, what should be in the center of this cake is either a little plastic penis or a little plastic vagina. Only you can't make plastic vaginas, that's just a hole. I did say that, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay. And you know, this is all about the stories we tell about our children. And we have great stories about these kids we're going to have. These kids are going to live out our dreams. We're going to have a football player. I'm going to have a ballerina. There is nothing wrong with stories that we tell. We are a species that tell stories. However, sometimes stories are dangerous. And I want you to remember this statistic tonight. 41% of transgender youth will attempt suicide. Many will succeed. I feel pretty comfortable saying to you that 100% of this population of youth will think about it. Now, if I were to divide this group here in half, take a few off of there, and I said, everybody on this side over here tried to kill themselves this last year, how would you feel? And that's the dilemma we're in. 43% of the youth on our streets are LGBTQ. Why? Because they're rejected from families. Because they're rejected from churches. Because they have nowhere to go. Schools don't accept them. Now, I want to talk just a moment about terminology, because this is where we get so screwed up when we talk about gender. For one thing, I don't use the term sex. Most people use sex and gender interchangeably. That's incorrect. Let's talk about sexual anatomy, because that is what we're talking about. The visible physical indicators of gender, both inside and outside. What is gender identity? And I want you to get this, that gender is something we feel. We feel it deeply inside. All right? Who you are, who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation, who you love, who you go to bed with. All right, so will you agree that we can have these terms be what we work with tonight? All right, good. We begin with the development of sexual anatomy. This is in the womb, folks. A lot of what goes on that has to do with gender happens before this baby is ever born. And this is what so few people understand about. So it's one step past the birds and the bees. I won't go through the birds and the bees with you. Well, maybe I should, but no, I won't. We're going to talk a little bit about science. And this is the science that you had in biology class when you were in 10th grade. I'm sure you all remember it really well. And this is talking about chromosomes, DNA, and genes. That moment when the sperm and the egg come together and the mama and the papa throw out a whole bunch of chromosomes and things that go on, and the fetus begins to develop. It's easy. It's very simple. XX is a girl. XY is a boy. This is the 23rd pair of chromosomes that we are talking about, okay? They're the only ones that differ between boys and girls. And what they do is they determine sexual anatomy. Now, why do we have to say any more than that? I mean, this is what we were taught, right? If you're XX, you're a girl. If you're XY, you're a boy. Only problem is these aren't the only combinations for these chromosomes in the 23rd pair of chromosomes. There is XXY, There is XXXY. There is XO, meaning there's only one X chromosome for the developing fetus. All of these things happen. They're just part of nature. It's what goes on. And they have an effect. Cell division begins if the chromosomes are XXXY. Let's assume that for a moment. Cell division occurs. And chromosomes basically hold the DNA and the genes. The job of DNA is to tell cells what they're going to be. DNA is the master plan. DNA says, you're going to be a heart, you're going to be a lung, you're going to go be a penis. And then cells go out into the direction of the fetus where they end up being. And those particular organs, lung, blood cells, everything in our body form. Now, DNA has to rely on helpers, and that's genes. DNA relies on genes. And genes are, think of them as switches. And I know this is really simplistic, and I will tell you that this will feel really complicated to some folks in here. That's okay. And yet, this is a very simple description of what goes on. It's not, it's much more detailed than this. But for our purposes, let's keep it kind of down and dirty, okay? So, the gene's job is to turn switches on and off. So, DNA has a job for you. Whether or not you do it well depends on the switches. The mere fact that you're a gene doesn't determine for sure that your switch is going to turn on. It doesn't determine for sure if it's going to totally turn on. So hang with me here a moment. Up until 6 weeks, there is no apparent sexual anatomy. There are cells right in here that are called gonad cells. They can be either testes or ovaries. It depends on what happens next. Interestingly enough, the default is female because something additional has to happen in order for the male reproductive system to form. That should make you women out there feel really powerful. Yeah, that too. All right. So here we go. You heard about this in the trivia question. About 25 years ago, scientists discovered something. Discovered that on that Y chromosome that the father contributes, fathers determine the sex. They have the ability to throw away some chromosome or not. But on that Y chromosome is a gene that is called SRY. And I used to have up here, sorry you were a dude, but someone told me that was sexist. So I changed it. So now what we have is, in other words, you are a dude. So when the SRY gene switches on, the male reproductive system begins to develop. Now, consider, this is at 6 weeks in utero. The sexual development system is one of the first systems to actually form. So, lights, camera, action. Between 6 to 14 weeks, given whether the SRY gene turns on for boys, if not, if there's no SRY gene, for girls, this is how it all lays out. It's so simple, except that it isn't. All right, fasten your seatbelts. Because sometimes the Y chromosome doesn't have an SRY gene on it. Why? Is there something wrong? Not necessarily. It's just what happens. You will hear me say this over and over again in my presentation. Nature loves diversity. We're the people that aren't comfortable with diversity. We're what make it abnormal. There is nothing abnormal about this. Atypical? Yes. But nature loves diversity. No SRY gene. So, what we have here, we have an XY baby. SRY gene is not there. Development happens. What was the default position? Female. So, what happens here? Baby's born. Parents are delighted. They look at the genitalia of this baby. What does the genitalia look like? A little girl. Congratulations, you have a daughter who has a surprise for you. Okay? Sometimes the SRY gene is there, but it doesn't turn on. Why? I don't know. It just doesn't. The same result happens. No male reproductive system forms. This baby is born looking exactly like a baby girl. Now, as if that isn't interesting enough, let's ramp it up just a little, shall we? Sometimes that SRY gene is there, and it only partially turns on. Anybody have any idea what might happen here? Intersex. All right. Who filled these seeds? We have people here that actually know this information. You're right. Intersex. I won't ask you, but I know that there are probably some folks in this audience that don't know the term intersex. We're going to talk a little more about this later on, so stay here with me. But yes, when the male reproductive system only partially forms, you have a baby that is intersex. What that may mean is that this baby has what's called ambiguous genitalia. It's not clearly a penis, it's not clearly a clitoris, it's somewhere in between. You may have a baby that has external genitalia that look completely like a penis, whatever else goes with external genitalia, but internally may have the reproductive system of a female. All right? Now, again, as if that wasn't interesting enough, sometimes you have an XX baby. What's the XX baby? That's a little girl. But somehow the father has thrown an SRY gene that ends up on one of these X chromosomes. And it is entirely possible that if that happens, the SRY gene will come on, the male reproductive system will form, and this baby will be born and will look like what? A boy. Now, at this point, you should begin to see some of the scenarios where gender becomes more than just one or the other, more than just the alignment of anatomy. And we haven't even talked about a lot of the more interesting parts of where gender comes from. That's how some of you might feel right now. And just to get your mind out of the gutter, this baby is saying, "What the fudge sickle?" All right, that was chromosomes, DNA, and genes. Let's move on to hormones. We know they have nothing to do with anything, right? Testosterone and estrogen are known as the sex hormones. I imagine everybody in this crowd knows that we all have both of these. It just depends on which is dominant, all right? Now, one thing I want you to really remember, oh, look at this phrase again. Does that look familiar? All right, we're going to talk about that again. Remember this. In utero development depends on certain hormones in a certain amount at a certain time to a capable recipient. Now, how many opportunities do you see there for diversity? Exactly. Exactly. Who's in charge? Well, this we found out in trivia. It's the pituitary gland. This gland in your brain is the size of a pea, and yet it has tremendous potential to create all kinds of interesting diversity in us humans. And yes, the pituitary communicates with the hypothalamus in the brain. The hypothalamus in the brain feels a need, sees a need, and delivers a message to the pituitary gland. Hormones are then secreted. Now, the fascinating thing about hormones is that when a baby is in utero, when that little XY baby is in utero, at some point in this 6 to 14 weeks, this baby will receive a testosterone bath. Those cells that are now testes will begin to secrete testosterone. And that testosterone will also have a role in the development of the sexual reproductive system. Well, what could happen in this scenario? You can have an overproduction of hormones. You can have an underproduction. You can have no reaction at all to the hormone. Example. Now, how many of you have heard of complete androgen insensitivity syndrome? CAIS is usually what it's referred to. And this is a situation where the testosterone is produced in utero. But what happens is this particular fetus does not have any receptors in their neurons that receive that testosterone and get the message to then continue the development of the male sexual anatomy. So what ends up happening? No male anatomy may form. Or what has formed may not form more completely. Because you also have partial androgen insensitivity syndrome. And this refers to a situation where the fetus only partially reacts. We are back to the situation again of intersex, ambiguous genitalia, or an intermixed sexual reproductive system. This is pretty interesting because a lot of times people don't even know that their bodies are inconsistent in terms of the sexual anatomy. A lot of times people find out when they're trying to get pregnant and they cannot conceive. What's the problem? They go to their doctors do an examination, and the news is, well, I'm sorry, but although your external genitalia is one way, your internal genitalia is the other. And that is the situation. All right, with XX babies, with little girl babies, you have something that's called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, CAH. This is an overproduction of testosterone. And the result of this is often an enlarged clitoris, which creates a situation where a doctor may not be able to tell what the genitalia is. Is it actually a penis that's too small? Or is it a clitoris that's too large? You know the term hermaphrodite. It's an old term that a lot of us used to use. Don't use it so much anymore. The more preferred term is intersex. And interestingly enough, intersex has now been turned into disorders of sexual development. Now, you might wonder, why would that be? Well, one of the reasons is insurance companies. In order to have coverage for a lot of these conditions, you need to be able to categorize. You need to be able to label these conditions. And sadly, we label things as disorders. We learned that with gender identity disorder, right? So at this point in time, that is the term that is used for the conditions that we're talking about. Until there comes something better or a willingness to cover these conditions without that term, I'm afraid that's what we're stuck with. Hard choices, indeed. Let's talk a little more about intersex. This is a variety of conditions where a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit the typical sexual anatomy. And we've talked about these situations here. I want to talk a moment about the remedy, and I say remedy in quotations, because there's nothing more uncomfortable for a lot of doctors than to have a baby born and you can't tell what the genitalia is. And the remedy for eons, and still at present, in some places even in this country, is to do what's called normalizing the genitalia. That's a very good, that is a great face you just made right there. Yeah, normalizing the genitalia. Now when you think about this, because literally what we're talking about is excess tissue in the area of the clitoris, all right? And this, again, is a situation where you don't know whether it's a penis or a vagina. So how would this situation be normalized? Now, if you know anything about surgeries, you know that to make a functioning penis is really challenging. It's something that doctors do not do well yet. So the result is just to make all these babies little girls. Now, what that means is a doctor's going to be wrong about how much of the time? 100%. Wow! You are merciless. Watch this guy over here, Jenna, okay? Right over there, okay? I mean, at least in 50% of the time, you've got a severe problem because you're guaranteed that in all likelihood, the sense of gender is not going to match the genitalia. Now, I also asked you to think about what does it mean to make a clitoris smaller? It means that you take tissue from that area. What is in that tissue? Yeah, a lot of nerves. And in fact, a number of people who are intersex came forward and talked about the fact that as a result of being normalized, they have had a lifetime of being completely incapable of having an orgasm. Now that is a big deal. That is a big deal. So the American Pediatric Association about 3 years ago finally came out with a statement saying stop doing this, basically. California just enacted legislation like last year saying you will stop doing this because the American Pediatric Association is only advisory. So it is still done in this country for all the wrong reasons. The correct way to deal with the situation is to let the child alone as long as there's not any problem with defecating or urinating, right? Just let the child be. And let the child grow and come into their own sense of gender, and then make decisions about this. This is way too important a decision to basically make the way it has been made in the past. A couple of websites here that have a lot of amazingly good information about the intersex community and working with these particular conditions. Now, how often does this happen when I'm talking about it? People will say to me, oh, this is exceedingly rare. No, it is not exceedingly rare. No one talks about it. 1 in 1,500 live births will demonstrate some form of atypical sexual development. Atypical, not abnormal. All right? Nature loves diversity. So, here's an interesting situation. Consider this. In the little village in the Dominican Republic and on Papua New Guinea, some girls at puberty will become boys. Wow, what? Yeah. Girls will grow external male genitals. The clitoris will form into a penis, basically. Why? It is because what happened is at the time of in utero development, there was an enzyme that did not get triggered. This is how delicate this process is in terms of how the body physiologically forms the systems. And at that point in utero, the penis was not completed. So the child looks like a girl. However, when puberty comes about, the testosterone surge that boys get at puberty will then have the enzyme that causes the penis to grow. Okay? Pretty interesting. BBC.com has a great series of articles on this, and I commend them to you. All right, mission accomplished. We're done. It's been a very busy 14 weeks. Physiology's done, and the star of this show has not even showed up yet. You got any idea who it is? Don't think that turned out quite right. Yeah, okay, fine. All right. So at 14 weeks, sexual anatomy is done. And the part of the brain that has to do with gender doesn't even start developing until halfway through pregnancy. Now, what part of the brain would that be? It would be the frontal lobe. It would be executive function. If I were to ask you, where in the brain does your personality live? Where? You just pointed here. Yeah, wouldn't you say? It's in the frontal lobe of the brain. That's the executive function, decision making, all the smart stuff happens there. So, doesn't it make sense that this is also where gender lives? Makes a ton of sense. But again, this part of the brain doesn't form until halfway through pregnancy. So it is no wonder that you get a mismatch at times. And we don't understand a lot about the brain. I mean, when you think about it, transgender has only been a subject that anyone's willing to talk about in the last 2 years, 3 years? When did Orange is the New Black come on? 5 years, you know, don't you? Okay, 5 years. Yeah, Laverne Cox. This has only become a subject we're willing to say the words on. So, what I have set up here is that preliminary research, and this is looking at the brains of transgender people who have died, doing autopsy basically is what they get information from. The preliminary research tells us that trans brains mirror their gender identity rather than their anatomy at birth. That makes sense to me. We will learn a lot more about that as time goes by. So stay tuned for that one. So, is it any wonder that gender is expressed as a continuum? And I haven't even talked yet about the situation here at the bottom. I think Jen's going to talk some more about this. Children may feel differently if their identity diverges from the traditional binary male-female options, regardless of their anatomic presentation. Gender fluid, gender queer, agender. I will say that one of the things that fascinates me about this topic is my own life experience, because I showed pictures of myself at the age of 5. It would be 58 years before I transitioned. I did not transition until the age of 63. Thank you. Yes, I was a very late bloomer. The thing that stunned me was that as much of my life as was focused on gender and trying to understand why I could never get beyond that question of when will I be the gender that I really know I am, is the idea that it doesn't go away. I thought when I reached a certain age, I wouldn't even think about this anymore. The trouble was when I retired from my job, I thought about it even more. All I could think about was I want to spend whatever time I have left in my life as who I know I really am. Now that says something to me about this thing called gender, about the reality of it. So the desire to be one's true self never goes away. And all I want to know is how we support that.